Very, very good afternoon. A warm welcome to Marble in the heart of Rosebank, and welcome to a very special edition of Dan Really Likes Wine. What on earth are we doing drinking wine at 12 o'clock on a Tuesday in one of the finest restaurants in South Africa? Well, today I'm joined by two-thirds, by some distance the most important two-thirds, of the team behind Epicurean as we celebrate two really exciting launches. Not just some Chardonnay that's got people very excited, but also the 2015 red blend that you might have seen on the show a little earlier on this year when we joined Mutle Mogase for his golf day at the River Club. We had a sneak preview of a red that is taking all that is good and great about 2015 and just amplifying it into what is arguably as fine a red blend as Epicurean has produced thus far. I am going to be chatting to a number of people through the course of the hour, some of them with us here in Marble, others joining us from both the Cape and the UK as we look at both of these wines with great excitement and anticipation. But before we get to them, before we even taste the wine, it gives me an enormous amount of pleasure to welcome back to the show Mutle Mogase, and to welcome for the very first time, and long overdue, Maziwa Shilowa. Gentlemen, lovely to have you on. Welcome and congratulations. It's a very special day. I know how exciting this is for the brand. I think you've been WhatsApping me 4 times a day for the last week, Mutle, because this is a space that just means so much to you. And I know we've chatted about it a little in the past, but a nice reminder, this wine journey of yours and how wine has become far more than a passion. It's a really big part of your DNA, isn't it?
It is, indeed, Dan. I mean, the passion goes back quite a while. Back to my varsity days. We're not going to mention which years. With joining the UCT Wine Club, as I've said previously, and it's continued to grow with the learning. And that's the great thing about wine, is that you keep learning, and as you learn more, you enjoy it more. So it doesn't mean you have to know everything about wine to enjoy it, but you certainly enjoy it better when you understand it better.
And when you do so with friends who share that passion, which brings us rather nicely to one of your two partners here. I've heard the story from Mutle about how you guys did it together. Often these stories differ slightly depending on who you ask. So I'm fascinated to know from your perspective how your wine journey led to the point where the Epicurean brand kicked off.
I think for purposes of ensuring that he's not caught out on what he may have said, which may not be true, I'll stick to the truth. Basically is that, we're there, we are friends, you spend a lot of time together, you have a sense of what the one likes, the one doesn't like, and just by chance, you find you are in this club, in that group of people, and they say, you guys talk a lot, man, about wine. What do you know about wines and all of that? Why don't you make your own wine, And then we decide, you know what, why not give it a shot? But also we could do that because we had taken time to go to France, both Burgundy and Bordeaux, and had been able to see that, there's a different style of wine that all of us prefer, could be done. But I think the biggest challenge is not only getting into a style of what you want, it's also that, and I think Mutle maybe will speak to that, is that in South Africa, well, primarily for financial reasons, but sometimes for laziness, most people get to drink, especially red wine, just immediately once it's new. So one, they don't have cellars, so they don't even have a sense of how good a well-aged long wine could be. And I hope that in the discussion that will ensue, you'll be able to see that in that Epicurean, we leave the name Epicurean. The bottle says Epicurean, meaning it's a singular. But if you look at the cork, it says Epicureans, meaning it's made not just for us, by us, but for everybody else who's an Epicurean. And one hopes that we're giving them an opportunity to really taste well-aged wines as if it was coming from their own cellar.
We're going to be tasting these wines in a moment, wines in two particular styles. How much argument, debate, furious WhatsApp conversation was there between the three of you, Moss and Gosheng, the other partner, about what style you'd embrace, about what you decided was both best for your brand, but also what spoke to your respective palates?
It wasn't a big debate, actually. As Masma was saying earlier, we found we're drinking pretty much the same wines. We like the same wines. So in Bordeaux terms, we tend to drink more the left bank wines more than the right bank wines, which left bank typically more restrained, whereas the right hand bank are normally quite voluptuous wines. So we prefer the more restrained style, which gave us longevity and greater complexity. And it was so pretty straightforward. So obviously, it's a range, and our palates will be somewhere in between. So there is a process that we go through when we do the blending to get to the right style for Epicurean. But it's settled now. This is our first vintage was in 2003. This is 2015.
It will be 20 next year. Working, I had more time to be able to visit the vines and get involved. Once I become a man of leisure, I've not been that every day involved. But I mean, we make time to be able enough to know where are the vines, when do you harvest, what is happening with them. But most importantly, once they've been harvested, it's important to be there to do the tasting, to do the blending.
White wine. And because we are a Bordeaux style house, it was always a question of do we make a Bordeaux style white blend or do we make a Burgundy style white wine? which is what we drink typically. We Chardonnay, great Chardonnay fans, and it's kind of settled on the Chardonnay. It's great. But obviously, it was important for us to access the right vineyards to be able to express what we feel and what we'd like to drink. So we managed to have access to a vineyard in Elgin. As you know, it's a cool climate area, which gives you long hang time, concentration, and great minerality, which obviously gives us the kind of Burgundy style wine. We'll now produce Burgundy here. We're under no illusion, but it's kind of similar characteristics that we're trying to get to, which is linear, mineral, but still with a full mouth feel. And hopefully that's what you'll find in this glass this afternoon.
Well, our wives thought it was just a no-brainer that we're not making any white, but they didn't understand, as Mutle was saying, that it's not a question of making any white. Is to make a white which you like, but which you can be able to go forward. And also, one of our friends, Alan Peake, would always say, Alan, and exaggeration that I can sell all of that in one go, in one sitting. But we have always wanted to. But I think it's always better to take time, because then you get it right and you perfect it as you go along.
Let's try some. This is the first public tasting, I think, of the white from Epicurean. We know it is from Elgin, and I think it's always, for me, fascinating to get an understanding from the people behind it what stands out. So, as you drink this, well, what is it about this Chardonnay that's putting a big smile on your face?
It's very funny because that you ask. Because it's like when you are in that area, you always think of them not as a wine area, but initially as more citrus, plums, and all of those, And it's either those remained in the soil many moons ago, because that's the first thing that will come to you. Part of that citrus element of it, but not citrus as in, what do you call it, a fully ripe orange, but one that you really can be able to have and go and peel it through, really, but still not want to eat the skin thereof, so that's the first thing.
It's a lovely way of putting it, and it's straight away. You spoke earlier about not trying to recreate something from somewhere else, but rather giving it a sense of its own place. And I think you've got that straight away. Wine that's clearly inspired by the style of Chardonnay that you really enjoy, but taking its cue from where it is from.
Yeah, absolutely. So the soils there are we've got Table Mountain sandstone and clay shade, which gives us that minerality. But what we've done to this particular vintage is we put in a dash of Stellenbosch fruit that gives you that creaminess. So you see as it warms up in the glass, it starts to give you that full mouth feel. But it also comes from contact with the lees. So that's just about 10 months on the lees. And we try and use as little oak as possible to give expression to the fruit. So we like to talk about purity of fruit. And hopefully that's what comes through in the wine. So it's not typically heavy with itself, given Chardonnay, but it's still, because we can make it quite steely, and we just love the balance in this wine.
That's always the best word when it comes to wine, isn't it? Balance. When a wine is in balance, you can't complain.
I think that's important as well, because it's not what you get at the beginning. That's very important. It's also, how is it at the end? How is it with your starter? How is it with your meal? I know it's often said, well, you can have this with this and that. But remember, most people don't have a luxury of one wine to start with, a second one with a main meal at home. So that white is what they're going to have. So it's important that, it's versatile, strong enough not to overpower or be overpowered by different kind of fruit, even if it's a white wine.
You spoke earlier about the joy and delight of discovering wine as it has got older, as it has become aged. Final question on this Chardonnay. What is the vision? Is this a wine you think in 5 years, in 10, in 15? When's it going to hit the perfect spot, do you reckon?
So 10 years probably is a minimum. But I think the wine would have been harvested around March in 2021. Then we go to barrel. We came out of barrel. We bottled this in Feb of this year. So probably 3 years from now, it's kind of really be at the top, and it will keep evolving with time in bottle. Yeah. But it's an exciting wine. Yeah.
Unless, of course, you're lucky enough to get a Magnum, in which case it will take you longer.
It's an area that I think we're starting to get a feel for in South Africa, that white wine, the year on the front is not the use by date. We've actually got wine that can live a lot longer, and this is a really nice example of it. And clearly age sits very much at the core of the philosophy that you guys have at Epicurean, because as we move on to our red here, you're only just releasing a 2015 red. I think I was still at school in 2015, so it's got a good few years on it. It's not a mistaken decision. You haven't just, we forgot about that, we better release it now. It's done very, very deliberately. Why is this so important to your philosophy?
Wine obviously starts off as a fruit, as we all know, and soon after the wine is made, it still has primary characteristics, which are, there's nothing wrong with them, but it's not how wine should be enjoyed. You need some evolution for a wine to settle down, for all the elements to integrate, because it's a blend. So it's blending 3 or 4, in this particular one, 5 different components. Plus you've got the influence of wood. So you want full integration so that all of those elements disappear. You've got a whole wine. In the early stages, you start to taste a lot of the plumminess and all of the fruit. Probably the wood still stands out a little bit on some wines. But 7 years after vintage, most of the elements are integrated, and the tannins are starting to soften up, and it becomes accessible. So, and that's really how you should enjoy wine. And we're giving our Epicureans a great experience. So that every time you take the wine out, you know exactly how it's going to taste, and it's magic here.
It's often hard, Mazima, to decide what South Africa's signature wine is. We do make so many different varietals so well, but for many people around the world, it is the rich red blend that is the best celebration of South Africa for them. What is this wine saying to you? Why is it standing out, particularly now, 7 years on?
You know, we took a view that Bordeaux blend is a misnomer, because wines in Bordeaux are blends. And as Mutle was saying, it depends which side of the river you are in. So it will either be Merlot dominated or Cabernet dominated, or just fully a straight Merlot. The issue for us is not the fullness as in gamey, like you're having a piece of bloody steak, like an animal. For us, it's more about, as Mutle was saying, once it has settled, it gives you that character of, it seems light, on the nose. It's not high alcohol, but still, it gives you that fullness in the mouth. And one of the things which we realize right at the beginning, you think you're going to do a launch, you bring about a few people, you think 1 o'clock to 2:30, everybody is gone. All our launches, we've never left before 5, and in some we've left after 7 in the evening, because it's wine that you can be able to continuously enjoy. So part of what you say is a South African style, full and all of that. You have one bottle and you think, no, I think my wife said we must come back home early.
I love the fact that you make exactly that point, because the last launch I came to, had lunch, tried the wine with you, and I said goodbye to a mutual friend of ours, the aforementioned Mutle Mogase. I then went off. I came back for a late dinner with clients, and Mutle was still here working his way through the tasting, which it's a great tribute to the wine. Let's try some of it, and very happily. So, the 2015, and you've almost got, I suspect, Mutle, even higher expectations than usual, because not only do you normally deliver a pretty special wine, but 2015 is one of those years that pretty early on was screaming from the rooftops.
Yeah, it's, I think from a South African vintage, probably everyone thinks it's probably one of our best vintages ever. And there's always a debate about what's the best vintage. So I was talking to some French winemakers. I say, the great vintage is when no one can make a bad wine, even if they try. And I think 2015 has worked out to be that way. So I think most people make the right calls. Just an 8th season, long hang time, which gives you obviously depth and concentration. This is obviously just before we had that drought in 2016. So this is just a spectacular wine. So we are extremely happy with this wine. It's mellow driven. For the first time, we have all 5 border varietals in the wine. Mellow driven. Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot, and Malbec in this one. So this is, we're just loving this one. It's got obviously the normal elegance of Epicurean. Osman, I mean, you've tasted this, but it's accessible. Although it will last for quite a few years, it's still accessible at this point in time.
And it's also, it's a wine with restraint. It's not a wine that smashes you in the mouth. It's not this big giant of a wine. It's certainly got some character, and it's certainly got some shoulders on it. But you mentioned the left bank and having those wines that are ever so slightly reined in, and that elegance and polish is right there at the forefront.
Maybe it also reflects, how soft, loving we are, can be punchy, but, takes. But more seriously, you're absolutely right. I think even if we want to, I think both the wines and the style we have chosen will never give us something in which it just goes heavy. You do want, again, we come back to the word balance. And I think sometimes balance, people think it's between heavy and light, when in fact for us, it's, even as it has stayed in there now for like 7 years, it has had enough time in the bottle, enough time brought up here in the warehouse, that there's not even bottle shock, when you go with it. Because sometimes you can get bottle shock and you think, oh, that wine, I wasted my money. When in fact you did it. It's just a question of wait. And I think anybody with a good cellar will be well rewarded.
We've got a number of terrific guests joining us. If you are just on the show now, this is a very special broadcast of Dan Really Likes Wine with Epicurean, the launch of the 2015 Red as well as the 2021 Chardonnay. Before I let you go, gentlemen, I know there's some other vintages you're going to be trying today. An important question, not if, but when I come around for dinner to join the two of you at your respective homes, what are you cooking for me? First course with my Chardonnay, second course with my red blend. Mr. Mogase?
I'll defer to my elder colleague.
Well, it depends. I mean, at home, my wife would insist we have a bit of fish stew. I mean, she went to Magica Roma and they make a mean fish stew and thinks, look, this is really fine. So you're able to have, you can have that. You can also, if you like, a bit of light pasta. not the one with too much chili or creamy, So I would have that, but I'm more likely to, I'm unlike Mutle, who cooks other style. I'm more into stew. So you are guaranteed goat stew, kudu, or oxtail or beef shin in that situation. But you can have this even with, I think, a good steak of picanha.
It all sounds mouth-watering. I'm going to get that address for dinner as soon as we're done with the show.
For sure.
And I think also some rich seafood. So if you can do scallops and crayfish, do that, and some because the freshness would cut through any of that richness with a shot. And with the red, a nice bistec alla Fiorentina would work. Even with wagyu because of the tannic structure. It's got the richness, but with the tannic structure that can stand up to bistec.
Which means you are at the right place here at Marble because, as he says, they'll be able to get you a good wagyu. And I think the guys do keep our wines really, and they always have some of the older ones here as well.
I certainly do. Gentlemen, two wonderful additions to the Epicurean story. I'm reminded of the words of Kevin Grant from Ataraxia on the show not that long ago when he spoke about Chardonnay, and he spoke about acid being the central nervous system of the Chardonnay and how it guides the wine around it. And I think here you've got that sitting perfectly. The fruit has not been weighed down by masses of wood, and it's expressing itself delightfully, and it's got a long road to go. And it's a wine, when I do get hold of some, I'm going to have to hold off reluctantly because in years to come and offer so much more. And another 2015 from South Africa that's absolutely singing, only just released, so it's also got a long way to go. But two really lovely wines and two lovely people to share it with. So thank you and congratulations on the latest additions to the family.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thanks for having us.
To all the other guests that are arriving shortly, share their experience.
Let's see.
Sure.
Great pleasure. Let's see what they think. That is two-thirds, the most important two-thirds of the Epicurean team, Mazima Shiloa and Mutle Mogase. The third member, Mos Ngosheng, is currently winning Worst Dressed again on a golf course somewhere in the world, but I know he would be here in spirit, and he is the third member of this Epicurean team. So who else do we have? Well, we're hoping to get Greg Sherwood on the line from London very shortly. We've got a couple of guests here at Marble as well. But first of all, let's head down to Cape Town, where the Joburg foodie, is he the Joburg foodie? I think he's the global.
Hey, Dan. Hey, Dan. Sorry, I seem to have lost sound on my side. I'm not sure if you guys can hear me, but yeah, it's always a pleasure to be here drinking Epicurean wine. I think what's really special about the wines is that, especially when it comes to the older vintages, that we are keeping wines back, and it's a conversation I know me and you have had quite a bit. That when it does come to aging our wines, does the responsibility lie with the winemaker, with the wine estate, or does it align with the consumer? So I think it's really beautiful to see the opportunity that a wine farm does have to be holding the wines back themselves. When it comes to Chardonnay, I know we just spoke about 2015 being an amazing vintage for South African wine. I'm putting my money on 2021 being a cracking vintage too. Everything I've tasted so far has really, really impressed me. And I think 2021 is going to be a really big year coming forward. When it comes to Chardonnay, another conversation we've had, I think Elgin is a fantastic place to be planting Burgundy varietals. You've got your high altitude, you've got high density. I think it is a really wonderful, region, and one that is going to be growing in prominence when it comes to the likes of Chardonnay. And I think they've done an exceptional job here. I'm just going to have another taste quickly. Um, Yeah, sorry, Dan, as I said, I'm having a bit of sound issues this side, but from what I can tell, we're talking about Chardonnays and how they used to be big and oaked. And you did have that ABC crowd who were anything but Chardonnay. And I think now we are seeing a more, I don't want to say Chablis style, because I think even Burgundy has, is showing remarkable restraint when it does come to wine. Um, and I think this is just a beautiful example. At the moment, we're speaking a lot about tension and texture in wine. And I think the Chardonnay shows it off beautifully. You've got the fruit, you've got the acid, you've got phenomenal texture. It's a absolutely remarkable wine. Super impressed with the oak integration as well. I think it's it's something that requires an exceptional amount of mastery to have such delicately intertwined oak usage, and I think they've done a phenomenal job. You get all that minerality as well coming through. It's an impressive Chardonnay, and I think looking forward to seeing how it develops over the next few years. It's a really, it's, I think our wine consumer, especially in South African sense, is very much still a very young consumer. And I think when it comes to aging wine, there definitely is that more people are cellaring wine. I think it is still a long way to go before we kind of get the messaging through, especially on a, maybe more supermarket level that, as you quite rightly pointed out, a vintage is not a sell by date. And I think especially if we move over to the 2015 here, just to see the remarkable elegance, it's delicate, it's finessed, and a large part of that, I mean, aside from the obvious exceptional winemaking, is that extra time it's been given. And I think it's a remarkable offering for the consumer to be able to buy now a 2015 wine. And it's guys like this who will start encouraging people to age wine longer and cellar wine longer. I'm still having a bit of trouble with sound, but I hope that answered your question. Yeah, of course. So not everyone can keep the wine long. But I think, as I did mention, buying a new release, and especially if you buy a new release of a 2015 vintage, it just helps encourage the consumer to really appreciate the ageability of wine. And yeah, I think it is something that we are starting to see more of, especially when it comes to red wine. There's definitely more of a consumer knowledge when it comes to appreciating somewhat older reds. And I think white wine is the next challenge. Is how can we get people to appreciate how beautiful a Chardonnay like this will be in 5 or 10 years' time. So yeah, lots happening in Cape Town right now. I've been down for the Eat Out Woolworths Restaurant Awards, which happened yesterday. I know you guys are sitting at Marble, which was awarded 1 star. But yeah, it is, you know, an Epicurean city here in Cape Town. The food scene is bustling. There's so much going on. We've got some really incredible new openings happening in the next few weeks. And yeah, looking forward to seeing what wines make the wine lists. I think that's always a interesting factor because, you know, Cape Town definitely knows food, and I think we're having some amazing wine lists down in Joburg, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the wine list starts looking like here in Cape Town. Yes. Thanks, Dan. Always a pleasure to be on the show.
To welcome Jenny to the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you for my invitation. It was just lovely.
I'm very glad you were able to make it here. And to do something that is really, it is a big part of it, what you did, because you basically had a long-running radio show that was an entire masquerade to allow you to sneak in food and wine on a regular basis and revel therein.
Yes, absolutely right. So when I left 702, I decided that I had to continue this. And it's just grown and grown and grown. It's lovely. I'm happy. Look at me.
You are a very welcome addition to a special show today as we look at 2 new vintages of wine from a group of guys who created quite a remarkable brand in a fairly short space of time. 3 guys who loved wine and decided to do something about it. When did Epicurean first appear on your horizon?
Oh, I think in the early days, because I was interviewing Bazima Shalom. He was then ex-premier of Gauteng, and he was obviously into wine. And the wife of one of the other partners was my financial advisor, and she kept saying to me, "You need to buy a house, and you need to drink more wine." And I said, "But why?" She said, "Well, because my husband is part of this with Bazima." So the whole thing, so from the beginning, I have been drinking it. And I have to say that I think their Chardonnay is so sexy you want to bath in it.
And I wouldn't put it past you to do exactly that. And we'll keep an eye on Instagram in case it does actually happen. When they created this, in terms of your knowledge, understanding of them, but also the history of these kinds of wine, you often get people who've got a desire to do something in wine. They throw some money at it. They get somebody else to do all the work. And it's often short-lived or it under-delivers a little. Were you expecting the wine to be as good as it turned out to be based on how well you knew the guys?
Well, I was surprised, to be honest with you, because they were all businessmen and politicians, and Bazima wore red socks. So, he still does, I think. And so I wasn't at all sure. But when it came and people started talking about it, and you could get it, there was one restaurant in Sandton where you could actually get the red wine, because Bazima went there for lunch every day. Never ate vegetables, ever. And so it was just this wonderful red wine. And I think it's got better and better and better. And I think then I learned that they actually do the blending themselves. So they go down, they sniff, they snort, they do everything that they should do. And they're professional at it. And it is just such a pleasure. And when the Chardonnay came out, I think the Chardonnay is just drop dead wonderful. So I just think it's something that started from scratch. They did have a bit of help from a few friends, but I think they do the wine themselves. I think it's wonderful.
Well, let's try this Chardonnay that has you so smitten. We've spoken a couple of times already on the show that the transition Chardonnay has made from bad old days where it was full of muscle and wood and the fruit was all hidden, and we rarely, if at all, got the best out of South African Chardonnay. Trying to mask it with other stuff, trying to make a Californian Chardonnay is thankfully largely a thing of the past. And what we've got here is this Elgin fruit bursting to life so excitingly. Talk us through why this is a wine of the many you get to taste. It really does stand out.
Well, I think first of all, on the nose, it's just wonderful. I mean, if you just breathe it in, and it smells of lemon, and it smells a bit of grass. It smells of Elgin, of course, and so it's had a long time to mature. So Chardonnay likes maturing for quite a while. It also quite likes oak, actually, but thank God this isn't, because they were so big, as you said, and so buttery that everybody was turned off. And now the trick is to get people to drink Chardonnay again.
Get that ABC club out the window.
Yes, indeed. So, but I mean, I'd love to know what you think of it, because I think it's lovely.
I think it's terrific, but it's also a wine, and again, from speaking to both Mutle and to Mazima, everything they make, and you can tell by the fact that they released their 2015 raid this year, 7 years later, the philosophy of giving wine time to really find its fullness of expression. This is wine right now we can happily drink gallons of, but where it can go, where it has the potential to travel, I think that's a really interesting part, not just of the Epicurean journey, but of our broader understanding of what South African wine can actually do. And I think this kind of Chardonnay is the one that if you've got the self-control, and I'm not sure I do, to stick a case of it aside for a decade, I think you're going to be quite richly rewarded.
Well, I mean, that is what everybody is saying, but we are producing other Chardonnays that are wonderful. And this one is just creme de la creme. And Elgin makes you want to keep it for longer because it matures. It takes a while to mature. And so I just think it's wonderful. I don't know what else to say, really.
I think that will more than cover it. So let us say a farewell to the Chardonnay for now. We'll get it back to you shortly. And then head over to the one that put the guys on the map initially. And it's become almost a misnomer. I think Mazima alluded to something similar, where Bordeaux blend is such a big and all-encompassing term for wine that you need to dial down quite a lot more to actually get to what a wine is. And yes, this has got all 5 varietals, but 7 years on from the blockbuster vintage that was 2015, we now have something that arrives in the glass that immediately strikes me, and very, very happily, as a wine with a lot more restraint than you might initially be thinking, because we often know the Bordeaux blend that's going to be big and strong and loud and noisy, and I don't think it is. I think it's held back a little, and all the better for that.
I think it's refined. I think that's really what you're talking about. So it doesn't punch you straight in the nose. It sort of goes down here, and then it just sort of goes down to your toes. It's lovely. It's a lovely, elegant wine. And I'm not sure did they put all 5 varietals into this one?
For the first time, I think. They've had 3 or 4 in the past, but this is all 5.
Well, you see the experimental, the money that you've got to have to put this aside for 5 years is significant. And they put their money where their mouths are, and their mouths are big.
As are, I think, all of ours, if we've got this to try out. It is the 2015, so it's already got plenty of time on it. But again, like the Chardonnay, it's a wine that if you can somehow hold out, it's probably got a good few years still to come to develop even further.
Well, I mean, it's really, really interesting because people are now talking about sort of the big 10 South African wines. And I mean, I think that these 2 are contenders because it's Paul Sour, it's Meerlust, and there's other wines that are coming into the grand old list. But I mean, those should be fetching great prices abroad as well, because we've got to start muscling into that and to sell our wines abroad, not just in cartons and things. We've got to sell them in bottles and make it sexy. And I think that's one of the big challenges we've got. And the other thing is trying very hard to keep something back. I think it's very difficult. I really do.
It certainly is.
Our wines are so drinkable.
Final one for you in terms of what this is saying about South African wine. There was a time not that long ago when if you set out to make a Chardonnay and you set out to make a Bordeaux blend, you would have thought, right, this is the Chardonnay from Burgundy I want to replicate. This is the left bank or the right bank Bordeaux blend that I want to get as closely as possible. There's no doubt that these wines are inspired by the travels to France by the owners, but it's wine that speaks to the terroir. It speaks to South Africa. It speaks to, let's show where our wine comes from, as opposed to how well we can try and mirror somebody else.
There's a sense with this one, for me, of minerality. And I've been studying Chablis. And there is a whisper of Chablis with this, isn't it? Because it's restrained, it's cool, it's sexy, it's high heels. It's just a lovely, sexy wine at any time of the day and on its own, as well as with food.
Well, we're going to be trying with some food shortly. I shall let you finish those off. Jenny, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Some great insight into the wine. And I think we'll need to get you back on the show soon to talk about Chablis in a bit more detail. Because if you've been doing some research, we'd love to have you share it.
It's all been liquid, though.
That's the best kind of research there is. All right, another fan of the world of Epicurean who mentioned mentioned sexiness and coolness and high heels. Well, speaking of exactly that, here's someone who's sexy and cool and occasionally wears high heels when he is out on the town. He is also South Africa's Sommelier of the Year several times over, and he is the man who patrols the cellar here at Marble, as well as overseeing Zoo and Saint, and they probably opened another 3 restaurants in the last week that I am not aware of. He is Vikas Human. He's a good friend of Dan Really Likes Wine, and he comes armed with a couple of glasses of wine. Vikas, lovely to see you. Welcome. Did I see you had a day off on Sunday?
Yeah.
That's your second one this year. You're losing it.
Got a bit of a time off, yeah.
Down at Eat Out Awards, which I know were a really big event for the restaurant industry. Quick takeaway from Vikas the sommelier, as well as Vikas the restaurant expert, given it's where you work such long and successful hours. What did Sunday say to you about the current state of play of South African restaurants as a whole, and where possible, wine within that industry?
I think it was, just good to see the Eat Outs return after 2 years. During COVID and everything. But yeah, it was actually quite interesting to see the new kind of judging system that they have, the 1-star, 2-star, 3-star award, and just sort of the kind of how they judged everything. It's not just based on food, but also there's a wine service component, there's a decor component, there's basically service on the floor from waitrons, product knowledge that the waitrons have. So it's actually very cool to see like a new kind of side of it. And we're very fortunate that we had 2 restaurants, Marble and Zoo. Marble, of course, getting 1 star for a big establishment like us, not doing the kind of intricate fine dining, but more focusing on consistency is very, very good to see. And of course, Zoo, a bit more smaller kind of plates with Moses, phenomenal 2 stars. So we're very, very happy.
No surprise, but congratulations nonetheless. It's nothing to do with the chefs, though, of course. It all comes down to the wine list and the wine that you deliver. And amongst your wine list, I know you have both of these, the Epicurean wine from a sommelier perspective. What does the brand say to you? Where does this wine fit into the South African wine landscape?
I think it's a very good sort of starter Bordeaux blend. The nice thing about Epicurean is there's always a back vintage that usually stands out on a wine list in South Africa. We see most of the big names coming out already on 18s, 19s, where the Epicurean guys really try and hold back as far as possible and then release the wine sort of a bit later. So it's nice to always see like 11 or a 12. Sometimes we get some 10s if we're lucky enough, some 10s on the list as well. And it just shows you what ageability can do in South Africa. We actually had a discussion on Sunday at Eagle's Nest, or yesterday in Eagle's Nest, where we talked really about sort of what is a good wine, and ageability was one of the things that came up at the table. And we can really see it in this kind of red wine that we can then produce. Like it's really, really something that's ageable. It does well with age in the bottle. It's still got lovely kind of texture, complexity, good structure. So I'm very keen to taste the 2015.
All right, we'll do that in a second. Let's kick off though with the Chardonnay, and this is out of 2021. It is the second edition. We got to know Epicurean through the red blend. When you bring in a second wine after a fairly successful first one, people are always watching quite closely. What do you make of the decision to produce this kind of style, and does it deliver for you?
I mean, Chardonnay is definitely on the up in South Africa at the moment. We're seeing a lot of Chenin drinkers moving more towards Chardonnays. And the nice thing about the Chardonnays is it's not that kind of bulky, oaky styles we used to see back in the day in South Africa. Winemakers are introducing much less new oak into the wines. They're focusing more on terroir. They're focusing more on fruit, purity, minerality. And that's definitely what you can see here. There is a bit of a backbone of oak that gives you that bit of sort of complexity on the palate, good structure to hold up to dishes, but also for ageability, you need a little bit of oak to go far, but then you have that pure kind of salinity and purity of fruit throughout the wine.
We still have, Jenny was talking about in a moment, the residual throwback of the Anything But Chardonnay Club. We're chipping away at it bit by bit. What are you seeing on the floor at Marble, the floor at Zoo, the floor at Saint from people with their white wine? Are they coming back to Chardonnay? Are they understanding Chardonnay? Are they appreciative of where Chardonnay is today?
Most definitely. People are definitely going back to Chardonnay in South Africa. We see it on the floor timelessly. In winter, it was quite nice because, I mean, Chardonnay is almost like a warmer kind of winter wine. But when people are asking for Chardonnay, they don't want those kind of super oaky styles. They are looking for that bit more kind of lightly wooded, but still with a lot of complexity and a lot of texture on the palate. And it's definitely on the trend at the moment.
And as a food wine, we've thrown a lot of things out the window where we only drink this with that, only eat that with this. The willingness to experiment with a Chardonnay with different dishes, is that more evident?
I think the nice thing about Chardonnay is it fairly gets picked always early, so you always work with something that's got a nice and high acidity, and that opens the door for quite a lot of food pairings, and especially at Marble or all around the world, where you can really go with something with a bit of richness. If you're looking at something like a bit more of a cream sauce, chicken works great, octopus, anything with like a little bit of richness and that beautiful acidity that this wine has can cut through that richness on the plate.
All right, getting a lot of very good feedback on the Chardonnay 2021. A vintage Steve Steinfeld said earlier he feels it's going to be one of South Africa's finest. 2015, we know, is one of South Africa's finest. It's a vintage Vickers that I often look at in the context of 2017, where 15 was going to be the vintage to end all vintages. 2017 started almost innocuously and slowly just started coming up onto our horizon. And I think with many wines, 17's almost overtaken 15 in terms of what it delivers. What is 15 giving you here from this? And are you as surprised as I am at the level of restraint and elegance to wine that from 2015 in particular, as a Bordeaux blend, a lot of people might have assumed would be a lot bigger than I think it's ended up being?
Definitely. I mean, the nice thing is that everyone was buying 15s about 3 years ago, and all the 15s disappeared. And now we're releasing a wine 2015. I presume people will be very, very happy to see that kind of on a wine list. But yeah, 15 and 17 are always two close vintages for me. Some wines show better in 17, some wines show better in 15. But 15 always presents, like, says with me as a big South African vintage. And what we can pick up on this wine is you can still pick up a lot of freshness in the wine. I mean, we are 7 years down the line. But there is that little bit of restraint, as you say, that the wine will definitely go quite far. It's definitely got ageability behind it. I mean, I did double decant these earlier, and it's still quite tight in the glass as we speak. So there's definitely a wine that can go very, very far, but very well balanced at the end of the day. And that's what makes a good wine for me, as a wine that's balanced very well. There's a good tannin, good structure, alcohol must be in line. There must be a good mouthfeel on the wine as well, and good acidity as well. But this wine is, for me, very, very well balanced.
It's also a wine that's not paint by numbers. It's not right. Every year we're going to nail 22% of Cabernet Franc and 31% of Merlot, and that is what we do. It's also not trying to engineer those numbers into a house style. Every year must be as close to the others as possible. There is a freedom to this winemaking where, okay, this is the year where we're going to go all five, as they have with the 2015 of the Bordeaux varietals, and we're going to make the best possible expression expression of the wine we have access to, instead of trying to prescribe something that maybe isn't there.
I 100% agree. I mean, as a winemaker, you can't follow the same recipe every year. Every vintage is different, and that really is what this one is. They really focus on what showed well that year. Maybe the Cabernet Franc had a better ripening, or the Merlot had a better ripening, or more Cab Sav. But they're really trying to play to their strengths here and really build a blend that is representing of that certain vintage.
The Marble menu is a long and difficult one to navigate because there are always 11 things I want, and that's just from the starters. From what's on the menu at the moment, what am I washing down some Chardonnay with? What am I throwing back with some of the red blend?
Let's start with the red. The red's really, really good. So I recommend definitely maybe one of our Wagyu cuts. We're doing Silent Valley Wagyu at the moment, so quite a high Wagyu grading. I just think all that marbling in the meat would very much stand up to this wine, and the wine should be able to handle that marbling. So either the sirloin or the ribeye would be a phenomenal recommendation. For those of you who like something that is a bit more dry aged, I would definitely recommend the Michos Jersey from Tsikama. I think that yellow fat that sirloin on the bone has will also definitely complement the wine quite a bit. On the Chardonnay, Chardonnay, as I said, it's always such a lovely wine to pair up, and there's so many things you can pair it with. But definitely from the starters point of view, the octopus, the Chusuvi for quite long and finish off on the fire. We do a beautiful tiger's milk dressing with that, some corn, which could work very, very well with that as well. Or I would definitely put it with our lionfish as well. We do barramundi at the moment, or Asian sea bass, and that will also definitely stand up very well to the Chardonnay.
So the reason for asking that question, Vickers, was to narrow it down to one dish each, not read the entire menu to me, but I understand why you've done it, because it is a terrific menu. And it also speaks to the versatility of both wines.
Definitely.
Talk to a huge number of dishes. You've got a large amount of wine to sort out, and also security to alert, because I think Jenny is running riot at the bar at the moment. I will let you head off. Thank you. Some wonderful insights into 2 great wines. And thank you for hosting us here at Marble.
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure.
There we go. Vickers Human, proper rock star of the South African sommelier world, and a man who was down at the Eat Out Awards over Sunday. Some nice insight there, but also a really good understanding of not just what we think as people are drinking and tasting and appraising wines on a daily basis, but also what people within the wine industry on the floor, the guys who are dining and eating out, are making of styles of wine, and these in particular. We are almost wrapped up, not long to go, but we've got an almighty high to conclude the show with, as we bring in as revered an expert on South African wine as there is, joining us not for the first time on Dan Really Likes Wine, but making a very happy return, Mr. Michael Fridgeon. Welcome.
Dan, how very nice to see you.
It has been hours. I have missed you.
And it's amazing. A little bit of wine and we come together again.
We do indeed. And we come together not just with wine, but also with people, because the team behind Epicurean, while not initially known for their wine skills, they started in different parts of the world. These are guys who've been on our local, especially Johannesburg wine horizon for it's close to 2 decades now.
I would say, exactly. And I've known most of them for that long. So what can I say? These are old friends, and they're introducing us to a pair of new friends.
They are indeed, and friends very close to them, because this is something that is a real passion for all three, for Mutle, for Mazima, for Moss. What were your initial thoughts when news of this project surfaced?
Well, firstly, I was very excited. I was excited because I thought they were the kind of people who, A, could pull it off, and secondly, could do it as a sort of flag-flying exercise that would help in the transformation of the wine industry, something we really have seen. If anybody was at WineX this year, that transformation is very evident. It wasn't when they started. And so it really is exciting to see what they've now produced and see the role that it's played in exactly this, bringing wines that are accessible and yet complex. But like them, in fact.
And they're wines that speak to an interesting method of putting together. They sat down and decided, what do we like? What do we think people will like? Find some sort of middle ground. And they kicked off with the red blend that we'll talk about in a moment. But the wine that's a little more recent an addition is their Chardonnay. And it's a Chardonnay that I think Mutle has been cartwheeling around the restaurant so far today. He's extremely happy with it. What do you make of this 2021 edition?
I've just tasted it and I really like it. I was, in fact, writing an article earlier this morning and reviewing some notes on Chardonnays tasted in the tasting room and at WineX. And there is a gap exactly where this wine is. There are some now very lean, underwooded, unwooded, finely wooded Chardonnays, and there's still several of those sort of very big, very polished, quite old-fashioned Burgundian styles of wine. This one sits in a very comfortable middle place. The fruit is amazingly fresh. It's crisp. It's on the sort of lime side of the flavor spectrum, not too tropical. And the oaking is almost invisible, but there. It's that sense that there's a platform of tannin that gives the wine real support as it goes from primary fruit into something older. So right now, and I was listening to Vicus's suggestions, I've kind of decided what I might have as a starter to go with this. It's got the acidity to do jolly well with the octopus, and it's got a linearity and freshness which is very pure. There are lots of people who are trying to make the style of wine, then fear that it isn't complex enough and use a little bit of reduction, that sort of struck match note, as if that will add the complexity. It's the purity, the linearity, and the layering of nuance that makes this such a fine wine.
It is fruit from Elgin. In years gone by, Elgin was dismissed by some as being somewhere that should stick to fruit and not wine. If we look at some of the Chardonnay feedback of the last little while, Oak Valley had 3 of the top 10 performers in Wine Mag's latest report. We've had some terrific Chardonnay from everybody from Almond Kirk to Richard Kershall, the 7 Flags at Paul Clover. Elgin as a world-class Chardonnay producer, is that a fair assessment?
That's absolutely fair. I think it is probably the place where firstly you get a range of styles, because though it's small and contained, stylistically and from a climate perspective, from the closest to the ocean to closest to the mountain, there's a range of styles. There are people, I think, who go too lean in Elgin, but certainly they get that so-called mineral style that people love. But if you go to Clover, and I think it was a Clover that won the Chardonnay Trophy this year at the Trophy Wine Show, you get enough of the freshness and some of the creaminess, just enough richness without it being lugubrious. So certainly if you said to me, where should you go looking for Chardonnay if you wanted to make a spot on one, I'd say stay with Elgin.
All right, well, this is a great endorsement of exactly that. Let's jump over to the wine that really put Epicurean on the map. It is that wonderfully broad term that is Bordeaux blend that can mean so much. What does this particular wine mean to you? What is it saying to you?
Well, once again, what I like about it is that it's not trying too hard. So it's not big, it's not overworked, it's under 14% alcohol, and that freshness does run through the wine. It's savory, but not simple. And it's certainly stylistically a change from the earlier Epicureans, which were rather big, robust, still well polished, but this has real finesse. For me, this is much more classically Medoc, in the sense that it's got a purity and a linearity. It edges towards austere in the very positive sense of the word. And it seems to me that it will be age-worthy. Amongst the 2015s that I've tasted, it's certainly one that's got sort of legs for a very long haul, and many of them don't. It was a vintage that excited people and is now disappointing many, not in this case. That's a wine with freshness, and it's got luminosity. It's the sort of thing you look for in a finely managed Bordeaux blend. I'm curious about the blend. I don't know what's in it.
You have all 5 Bordeaux varietals.
But I sense that it's more Cab in Cab Sav and Cab Franc. It's got that lightness of touch that would surprise me if you said it was more than 50% Merlot. So I like the spice, I like the detail. I think there's some Petit Verdot that's keeping its feet on the ground. And it's a really good wine. Drink it now, keep it for quite a long time.
Final question for you before you head off to demolish that octopus. The 2 wines that we have here, does the style of these wines speak to you about a broader look at South African wine and how we are reining ourselves in a little in not going so overboard in making some of our best wines?
I think that is true, but I think it speaks more about the people behind the brand. In other words, I think there's a very conscious shift here to food friendly rather than statements in style. And that's very important. I think we see a full spectrum in South Africa. I think we're seeing lots of people who are now going, in my mind, too austere, where you open a bottle and taste nothing for the first 5 minutes, then you reach for a Rennie's. After you've done that, you finally get the glass to talk. This is talking straight away. I heard Vicar say double decanted, but I think that was with the red. They're both wines that have immediate accessibility and, as I've said over and over again, a really attractive purity to them.
Well, that is both a great note on which to finish. It's not a completely accurate one because the accessibility is slightly limited because they don't make that much of the wine. But in terms of the accessibility Michael was referring to, it is, of course, absolutely spot on, which is no surprise for South Africa's definitive wine writer and critic. And that wraps us up for a very special show. We've got one or two other guests who we have been planning to join us, but I think we'll just have to do some more Epicurean tasting on Dan Really Likes Wine going forward. A big thank you to the team from Epicurean, Mutle Mogase and Bazima Shiloh joining us today, Marcin Gosheng, the third part of that wine-loving triangle, and to Ponso, who's organised everything for us today, and the team at Marble, brilliant as ever, headlined by Vickers and his encyclopedic knowledge and understanding of wine. That wraps us up from Marble. I'm off to follow in the footsteps of Mr. Fridjon and do some damage to that menu, but more importantly, try some different vintages and revel in a really, really exciting South African brand that's not yet 20 years old and is already putting South African wine on the map right around the world. This has been Dan Really Likes Wine with Epicurean, live from Marble. Enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. Happy drinking, and do your best to get hold of the Chardonnay and the red blend. You won't be disappointed. Cheers.